Somebody sends you a message, you're the one who came, I think I like you, and you left your number. Can I meet you later? And then now it becomes a physical security issue.
What can we do to protect ourselves?
So you need a good password.
Carol at 123.
You have to have
What is data privacy?
It's a very old concept. Something when
we saw somebody's hospital data published. Who's held to account? Is it the hospital?
You need to carry out an investigation.
The role of AI leading up election year. Where does data protection come in?
We don't have laws that may tackle this, but
Mugambi Laibuta is a certified legal powerhouse with enough degrees to make your LinkedIn page blush. PhD in law from WITS? Check. LLM from the London School of Economics? Of course. Advocate of the High Court of Kenya? Naturally. Certified Information Privacy Manager? Now he's just showing off. A few years ago, Mugambi, you actually managed to turn around a diabetic situation.
I traveled for work, started feeling unwell, type 2 diabetes. I meet this doctor, and that was in 2018, and up to today, my blood sugars were within the acceptable limits.
If you were to do your last piece of advice on data protection, what would it be?
One is that...
Mugambi, welcome to the Nitpicker Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great. Let me paint a picture. I walk into a building. The watchman, after the perfunctory security search, gruffly tells me, "Unaenda wapi?" And I turn to walk away. I say, "Look, I'm going into that building." And then he says, "Sawa." Then he says, "We, jiandikishe kwa kitabu, write in the book." Eh? Yeah. Should I do that? I really hate that. Or you're driving into a building and they tell you first write your ID and everything. Should I do that? Is there an obligation to do that? Where did that come from?
So remember, many years ago, there were a lot of terrorist attacks. Do see it, the Garissa attack. So at that time, the security laws amendments started coming in. And one of the laws that was passed is called the Private Security Regulations Act. There's a provision that introduces an obligation for each individual getting into a location, whether it's a building, it's an estate, whatever installation. And the obligation is for you and I to identify ourselves, to provide some form of identification, whether it's a national ID, passport, or anything else that can identify you. And then the person manning that, mostly it's private security that's manning that, then they'll take down the details and they can retain your ID until you exit, or they can also deny you exit. So it's stated in the law.
Deny you entry.
Yeah, yes. They can deny you entry. So what is management reserves right of admission was actually codified in law. And it's because of these terrorist attacks that we faced many years ago. So yes, you and I do have an obligation, and that person has the power, statutory powers, to deny you entry into whatever installation.
Well, the truth of the matter is, Mugambi, most of us give our fake, especially when we're driving into buildings.
Yes.
We give a fake ID, and there's no way, because they just tell you you're supposed to just write a number. So we write a number, telephone number, you write whatever.
Yes.
So has a mischief really been cured, if you have to think about it?
Not at all. Because that's why they have no means of verifying whether that identity document is authentic or not. It's not like a bank.
Yeah.
A bank, if you produce your ID, they can query IPRS, the integrated population register, and see is this authentic or is it not. But you see that private security individual, at the gate here downstairs, they don't have that capacity. So they just take the document and they record. They don't know whether it's a stolen ID or it's an authentic ID.
Actually, that's a good point, because there's some buildings where you can't give them a fake telephone number because they input the telephone number, then the telephone number sends you a code, and then it's only when you give them that code that they let you in.
Yes.
But I can still use a fake ID. So don't try this at home for those who are doing this. But what I'm hearing you saying is I can still use a fake ID.
Yes.
Because they've got no way of verifying that this ID is the legit one.
Yes. So that issue of verification becomes a challenge. But another thing, I don't know whether you've gone to, maybe you go to a mall and they're searching you, they're like, tuachie kitu, give me something.
Exactly. So
the question is, those who give something, tea or whatever, lunch or that kind of thing, are they just allowed to get in without having record these details? And another issue is that the private security Regulations Act provides that they are only to use that information purely for that security verification.
Yeah.
But then you find that sometimes it's a black book. It's a black book that's on top of a desk or at the sentry. So where does that information go? That's why you find sometimes you are registered to political parties you have no idea about. You are getting text that I don't know, registered to this digital lender and that kind of thing. Or somebody sends you a message, oh, you're the one who came, I think I like you, and you left your number, and they're like, oh, can I meet you later? And then now it becomes a physical security issue, because somebody saw you get into a building, they think they like you, and then they start stalking you.
In fact, Mugambi, that was actually going to be my next question, which is, a few days later, after I've come from this building, I've left my ID, I've left my telephone number.
Yes.
Somebody gives me a call, calls me by all my government names.
Yes.
Reads out my ID number. So I'm sorry, and they speak with such authority, and they say, hey, madam, your account is about to be locked.
Yes.
So of course, I panic. And I verify that yes, that indeed I am with this bank, or that those are all my names, and that's my ID. And then in a few minutes, all my accounts are locked.
Yes.
Yeah. Ghafla bin vu, all the money in my accounts is taken out.
Yes.
And this has happened to quite a number of people, particularly older people, our grandparents and everything. What can we do to protect ourselves from that? Or what is being done by a government that created this monster to begin with, which is a requirement to give away our private data, and it is now being abused and misused, as you've just said. Everything is sitting in a black book somewhere for sale.
Of course, there's the Data Protection Act that provides that whoever is handling your data needs to handle it using certain principles. One of the most important principles being security and confidentiality of your personal information. But as you say, as we see some of this data that you leave, like when you're getting into a building or a supermarket, etc., it's just it's a book. It's a black book where people can come and take photos, and that's why now you find that criminal elements come and mine that data and use it for whatever purpose. So you're finding like banks, a lot of banks now, you constantly, like my bank, you constantly receive a message: don't share your PIN, don't share your account number. Don't share your password, etc. So you find that many banks, many financial institutions, not just banks, SACCOs, etc., constantly they're sending their customers or their clients this kind of information, not to share their personal details with anybody. Then also it's to recognize what are the official phone numbers of this organization. Like for me, some of the financial institutions that I deal with, I have saved the official phone number that they call me, like the relationships manager. So if it's a different call, somebody tells me that they'll shut down my account, I of course know that, no, that's not happening. Then I tell them, they say, sometimes you receive somebody saying, I'm at your house, I'm going to cut the electricity.
I got that call on Saturday. I really abused him and he abused me back. So
so we usually tell them, cutter,
yes,
switch it off. They're like, yeah, you have arrears, we are switching. I told them, please,
go right ahead.
Go right ahead.
Yes.
Please switch it off.
Yeah, but not everybody can speak with that authority.
Yeah.
Most people, because these guys speak with such force. Yeah. My daughter, when she was 19, got a call. She had an M-Pesa on her line, and she got a call. Now she's 19, so she's fresh from school. Yeah. So somebody calls her, and he's speaking with such authority. Madam, we're going to cut. Is this your PIN? Yes. And he opened up a, M-Shwari account. Luckily, the poor girl only had like 19 shillings in her account. That's what happened. Yeah. But she was really, really traumatized by that event.
It's an issue of awareness, as you notice, because a lot of us know this information because it's the area we work in, where you get training on data hygiene, for example, cyber hygiene, data hygiene, and that kind of thing.
What does that mean, data hygiene?
I mean, simply is that you create awareness, or you know that, for example, there's information that you need to highly protect, like your financial information, your passwords. You don't choose a password like Carol at 123. So you need to change your passwords from time to time. You need to use two-factor authentication. You need to have password authenticator app and those kind of
very big English. And we'll talk about you, lawyers, and your Kisungu mingi.
So
break it down for me. What does two-factor authentication?
So what I mean is that for example, you need a good password. Let's start with that.
What's a good password? Carol at 123 is so nice and simple for me.
I mean, as you see, sometimes people say that sometimes you have to put you have to have uppercase, lowercase. You need a character. You need it needs to be around 10 or so characters. So something that will not be easy for someone to guess or to decipher. Because if somebody knows, for example, your name and your birthday, and your password is your name and your birthday, and because of what we post on social media, people can even guess, like, for example, your children's birthday. It could be you've used your child's name as the password, your wedding anniversary, or a significant event in your life, like when you graduated, that kind of thing. So it's to look for a password that somebody wouldn't guess. I have friends who say that, I have a friend who says all his passwords are in Luya, and it's Luya vegetables. So if you can guess, so if he says a Luya vegetable and it has uppercase, lowercase, it has characters, so if you can guess that, then you deserve to steal from him.
I love that.
Yeah, you deserve to steal from him. So that's what we mean. And then, of course, is to confirm, to verify. For example, if somebody calls you and tells you that there's some problem with your bank or your credit card, you know who you deal with. Mostly, you know who you deal with at your bank or at your branch. Is to end that call and call that person that you normally deal with and say, I've received this call, etc.
Assuming that I normally deal. So Mugambi, I want to take you to my grandmother.
Yeah.
She's deep in a village, somewhere deep in Nyeri.
Yes.
She doesn't have a smartphone, she has the, what do you call the non-smartphone?
Yeah.
A kabambe.
Yeah.
Help me deal with her.
So for the older folks, like for me in the village, I tell people, like, one, if you receive a call, somebody asking for your PIN, like your M-Pesa PIN, no. If somebody asking for your ATM PIN, don't give them. If somebody asking you for your bank balance or to transfer money, and sometimes the village is something simple. There used to be one common one, mtoto ameumwa na nyoka, tuma pesa, yeah. Or that tunafukuza mtoto shule.
Exactly. Yes,
so you see, for the older folk, they're like, no, we need to deal with this. This is an emergency. But it's to educate them and tell them, one, unless you're very clear who you're sending M-Pesa to, don't. Secondly, if someone even at the bank or at your circle asks you for your M-Pesa PIN, do not give them.
You're taking me back to our fourth president. Was he our fourth president who told us security begins with you?
To some extent, he said it in an arrogant fashion, but to some extent, to a certain degree. Yeah. If it's security or terrorism, surely some of it doesn't start with me. Yeah. But if it's security, for example, this my PIN number, that you have to ensure that your phone at least has a security password. It's not 000, it's not 123. So if you're able to educate the people who may not have this technical know-how, that they have that kabambe phone, that please ensure that your PIN is not something somebody can easily guess. Never give your PIN to anyone. Never disclose your M-Pesa balance or your bank balance to anybody. Those simple things. And if somebody calls you asking about details of your bank account, you rather call me and I'll talk to them, but don't engage them.
So they don't have the benefit. So I'm hearing you saying, educate your people at home.
Correct.
What is two-factor authentication?
So here is where, for example, when you're logging in, maybe to where you're doing financial transactions, and you input your PIN. So you get into the first layer, and then they say, we will text you a one-time code to your email address or to your phone. Then you decide, okay. Then they send you the code and you input that code. So you see what has happened is that there's the PIN that you know that you've input into.
So kind of like eCitizen. What happens with
correct.
eCitizen?
Exactly. It's what eCitizen does.
Okay.
Or some banks, when you're carrying out your transaction, for you to complete a transaction, they first send you input, you do the transaction, then you're about to complete, they ask you for the one-time code that they have sent you. Yes. And they have sent it to your official email or to your phone number. So the assumption is a probability of somebody else having access to your official email and your phone number might be, the chances are limited.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, privacy, just like security, begins with you. So maybe let's first start defining what is data privacy, because this is your baby. This is what you've decided to focus on, and why you're here today is to tell us about that. What does data privacy mean? Why should I care about it? Because a lot of our private data, as you've just very well articulated, is already in the public domain.
So privacy, actually, it's a very old concept. It's like something when you go take a shower, you close the door, it's a curtain. You want to have your privacy. When you're using the washroom, you want, those are indications of privacy. In your bedroom, when you're sleeping, you close. You have a fence. You have a fence in your home. I mean, even traditionally, you find, even if there were huts, the huts are the enclosures. There were huts designated for children, for adults, for young boys, for older boys. So the concept of privacy was there. It's always been there. Like even when you're having discussions with a loved one, you don't want anybody else. Even a long time, you wouldn't, like you'll hear, like traditionally, when Shosho is cooking, say, nyinyi wanaume tokeni. This is the area for just women. We are doing our thing. All right. So, and the men, for example, they are going to discuss whatever, they'll be on their own, or that concept of privacy, that there's certain information, there's certain discussion that really it's not for everyone. Right? The same thing when you go to hospital, even if it's for a call, you really don't want people to know why is it that you are in hospital. I mean, even so simple thing that it's really your personal matter, what medication you are taking. And the reason is that because this information, there's potential for it to be used against you. Right? Let's say, for example, something as simple as, so in the workplace, somebody has been grappling with an addiction issue. And then maybe they've gone to rehab, etc. They may not want to disclose that at some point because it may hamper their business prospect.
Indeed,
all right,
career prospects.
Career prospect, career progression, and that kind of. They might have changed completely, and they have taken. So, what we are discussing, that the information you have, your email, your phone number, if accessed by criminals, you will lose your savings. So there's an element that there's harm that may be occasioned by your data falling or information falling in the wrong hands. So you'll find that since time immemorial, the same way, even in our constitution, independent constitution, searches, when police are carrying out a search, they needed to have a court order. I mean, it's not practically implemented, but they couldn't just come into your home and start carrying out searches because there's that privacy of the home and privacy of the person. Then, of course, a lot of constitutions around the world have this now right to privacy, and then we have the right to data protection, because data now it has critical value. So we're not saying, the argument is not that your data cannot be used. We're saying it has to be used under certain parameters. You need to know that somebody wants to access your data.
How did you get interested in data protection, Mugambi? I mean, you've done constitutional law, legislative drafting, human rights. How did you even get interested in data protection? Because you wrote your PhD thesis, Adequacy of Data Protection Regulation.
Yes.
Allow me to use a legal term. What was the mischief you were trying to cure?
So my interest in data protection, actually it was by accident. So, of course I knew, so the first time I came across a data protection bill in Kenya was around 2009. But then it was not a thing, I didn't pay much attention in. Then when I worked with the committee that drafted the Kenyan Constitution, the right to privacy was in the Constitution, Article 31. All right, then a few years later, that bill surfaces again, a data protection bill. So I read it, but I'm like, okay, big deal, nothing much to it. Then around 2014, 2015, people online, and online here, say on Twitter and Facebook, Kenyans who used to interact online will get arrested for what they will say against the state, for example, against politicians. So myself and a larger group of lawyers and human rights defenders will go to rescue these people, for example, from the police station. And we'll ask the question is, why was this person arrested? They say, they said something that somebody did not agree with. And this person will be a politician or somebody related to a politician. And what was interesting is that when they will be arrested, the DCI will take away their gadgets. And they'll say they're taking their gadgets for analysis, and you'll ask, do you have a court order? And they will say, for what? Why do we need a court order to do what? And then they will also be in a position to pinpoint where this person is. Like I remember there was one person, he was actually arrested in Mombasa and brought at high speed to Nairobi, and they knew exactly where he was, which means they're tracking this person. So at that point, we started having arguments, discussions about digital rights. What is this right to freedom of expression?
What year was this?
These are around 2014, 2015. So here when you find that a lot of bloggers, of course now they're in government, they used to be arrested a lot. For whatever they've posted online. Then you also had like blogger, if you remember, there's one individual called Bogonko Bosiri, just disappeared from the face of the earth. So the question we kept asking is, how do they know where people are? So we started researching and studying and then training individuals about digital rights, the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of the press, the right to privacy, because how you protect your information now determines on how the kind of surveillance that is being carried out. Then fast forward around 2016, the EU, at that point the EU were discussing the GDPR.
There's very many acronyms.
The GDPR,
the European Union.
The General Data Protection Regulation.
So the EU, being the European Union,
yes,
was discussing the global,
General
Data Protection, GDPR,
General Data Protection Regulation.
Okay.
Specifically for the European Union community. Okay. It's not for everyone else.
Okay.
So when they were discussing that draft, I became interested. I was like, why are they making a whole hullabaloo about it? What's so big about this thing? Then I remembered my experience with these bloggers and the digital rights campaigns that we were doing. I realized, no, there's something that we need to focus on this data protection. So of course they passed the GDPR.
What was again behind the EU? Why were they pushing for this? What were they looking to protect their citizens from?
They had a general directive, a data protection general directive, a general law that their directive they felt wasn't capturing the current issues on privacy and data protection. So they wanted to have a document that is aligned to the technology, especially to the technology that is coming up and the privacy issues around that technology. But for them, they always had laws relating to privacy and data protection. The European Convention, the Human Rights Convention, has a provision on the right to privacy. So it was nothing new to them.
Okay.
Just like for us, privacy is nothing new because it's always been featured in our constitutions.
That's right.
But the aspect of focusing now on data protection wasn't a focus for us, especially. So as the GDPR, so they passed the GDPR, and also it was interesting because we will get emails. I don't know whether you received those emails that now we have moved to GDPR. Do you accept us to process your data? And all of us will click yes.
Yes.
We'll just click yes.
I mean, even airlines now are forced onto, because I remember even Kenya Airways had to send messages to all its customers that because we are picking up data on passengers going to Europe, we are now required, and we now fall under the GDPR rules because we're collecting data for Europeans or people going into Europe, something along those lines.
Yes. So that piqued my interest, that discussion. Then when the government then in Kenya wanted to have Huduma number, and because they wanted to have Huduma number, there was still a bill. So now there were two bills. There was a Senate bill by Gideon Moi, and there was a National Assembly bill that was being pushed by the leader of majority then at the National Assembly. The government was not too focused about it, but then they wanted Huduma number. Remember, the discussion was that Kenya needed to go towards a digital ID. So because of the digital ID push, there are some civil society organizations went to court to challenge the implementation of that digital ID. On several aspects, but the key aspect that I'll talk to is that the argument was that you can't have a digital ID if we don't have a very strong data protection law. So the government was like, okay, fair enough. So because they loved Huduma number more than anything else, they said they gave us a Data Protection Act.
I see. So it was brought in support of Huduma, but because of what civil rights activists had done.
To pacify the civil society actors. They're like, oh, you're opposing Huduma number because there's no Data Protection Act. But here we have given you a Data Protection Act. So let us implement Huduma number.
And Huduma number was picking up a lot of our data. But Mugambi, hang on a second. Huduma number picked up the same data that is in our national ID.
Yes.
So what was different?
Is the manner in which it was being implemented. Because one, there are a lot of complaints that sometimes you find your data out there. I mean, like you find yourself being registered to this, to that, and you don't know where people are getting your data. And the data is very authentic. Then secondly, the argument was that the government needs to put in measures to ensure that at least our data will be secure to an appreciable extent.
Especially now that it's going to be digitally held.
Correct.
So I'm hearing that these guys decided, don't waste a crisis. Since our data is already being misused, let's use this opportunity to protect ourselves as we're moving to this Huduma number, because the data is the same.
The data is the same.
Yeah, so let's not waste this crisis. Let's start protecting.
Yes, and then the argument was that government has a lot of data, but in silos. So we were arguing, why don't you just put the data that you have together within a centralized hub or something like that, instead of continuously asking people to register for their data. But then remember also, now they were asking for extra data. They're asking for your location, GPS location. So you're like, why do you need my GPS location to register for Huduma number?
Who was asking for GPS?
Huduma number. They're also asking, there's at some time the argument that they also wanted to have a record of DNA, I don't know, DNA records and those kind of things. So people are like, no, you really can't do that. They wanted your email tied to the Huduma number. They wanted your phone number tied to the Huduma number. So you see the mischief that can happen with consolidated this kind of data. So I say, fine, if you're consolidating it, and the court refused the issue of GPS and DNA data. The court said, no, that you can't touch. That one, that genetic data, now that leave it. So you see the mischief that can come when you now consolidate all this data. So we're just saying, let the government put in mechanisms to assure Kenyans that this data will be secure, and even if it's being used for an official purpose, that we know that there's at least a procedure, a very clear procedure. There's an historical record of how this data will be dealt with.
So you said there were two bills. One was by Gideon Moi. What were the bills for?
So they were both data protection bills.
I see.
Of course, before Huduma number, Senator Gideon Moi was wanted to also push, because he was the chairperson of the Senate ICT committee. So he wanted to put a bill that had been in existence for a while. He thought that this may be the opportunity. But the government also wanted a watered down bill. So I think they told him to stand down and now allow for the one being pushed by the leader of majority.
So that bill gets pushed through?
Yes.
All right. So does civil society get placated?
Not fully.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, so as Huduma number proceeds, there was another court petition where the argument was that the government had not done what we call a data protection impact assessment. You have not identified, if you implement this Huduma number, are there potential harms and risks to Kenyans? And if you identified those harms and risks, how are you going to mitigate those harms and risks? And that's a document that they were saying that's a process that hadn't been carried out. So that petition said that government must carry out a data protection impact assessment to identify these harms and risks and point out how they are going to mitigate them.
Are you happy with the data protection laws as they are today?
Not at all. I think that's why I spent also 3 years researching it for my doctoral studies. Yeah. So I asked myself, there's one thing to say a law is bad, but I asked myself, how can I justify the things I'm saying that it is deficient? So what I did is I came up with a formula, a checklist to identify data protection laws, they are sufficient, whether they are adequate or not. So when I used my formula to the Kenyan data protection law, I identified where the gaps are. The good thing is that the Ministry of Information, Communication and the Digital Economy and the Office of the Data Protection Commission are aware of this, and they have put in place initiatives to see how to improve the act. So hopefully maybe in the next 1 year or so there'll be hopefully an amendment bill.
Mugambi, hope is not a strategy. Give me some. Hope is not a strategy. Don't say within 6 because what's a burning platform? If there's no burning platform, they're not going to do it.
The thing is, the legislative processes in our country are quite slow. Yeah. And then remember, next year elections is in 2027.
Yeah.
So 2026, we've already started electioneering period, which means that the calendar of parliament will be shortened. And that's why I say hope, because unless that, if and I say if there's an amendment bill by the ODP, Office of the Data Protection Commission and the Ministry of Information, Communication and Digital Economy, if it's prioritized within the order paper and the government business, then yes, it will be considered before we get into a serious electioneering period.
And what are the amendments you're looking to? And have you been involved at all in these amendments?
Yes. So I am part of, I am the chairperson of the Data Privacy and Governance Society of Kenya. And as a society, what we did, so this is a society that brings together people within the data governance space in public sector, private sector, academia, civil society. We have young professionals and university students. And our aim is to bring together professionals working within not just the data privacy or data protection, but data governance space generally. And we have around more than 730 signed up members in Kenya, a few people from outside Kenya. So what we did last year is that we asked members questions. What challenges are you facing in trying to implement the Data Protection Act in your spaces of work or in your business environment? And they identified those challenges. Some of the challenges were that, for example, the definition of consent. What does it mean that I have consented to give somebody my data?
So give me an example, because I'm seeing situations, I keep seeing situations in the media where the Office of the Data Protection, somebody says, I was at a party, my picture was taken, and then it was published without my permission. Or schools that publish billboards and put pictures of children and parents come up in arms. So where is that? Break it down for somebody who's not understanding, because we're using data protection, the word a lot, but what does it mean for Wanjiko walking on the street?
For example, have you given someone permission to put your photo on a billboard?
No.
Have you given someone permission to put your photo on a social media platform or on their website?
I went for a party, and they said that we'll be taking photos. Yes. So you just be aware that we're taking photos, and then I see my photo.
Yes, the expectation is not that your photo, and the biggest issue is the photo being used for a commercial purpose. For example, to say Carol was at this venue, and you can see she was having fun, so please also. So if it's for a commercial purpose, it's different if you go to a friend's house party and you share the photo and so share that we were at the house party. That's a bit different, because that's a personal. So
if my friend publishes my photo, we were at her party, that's not a data protection, that's not a data privacy breach. But if I go to a restaurant,
yes,
and that restaurant publishes my photo and says, look at guys, sherehe.
Yes.
All right, come to this place, let's call it, Atom Lounge.
Yes.
Come to Atom Lounge and have a great time with my picture there having a drink. That's a problem.
Then that's an issue, because that's commercialization of the data. But also for your friend, if you ask them to take down the photo, they ought to oblige to take down the photo. So back to the argument. So what gaps did we realize? That issue of consent, permission. How do you give permission? Another gap in the law is that it doesn't define the security of data. It's not very specific on security of data being a core principle. So when you look, for example, at Section 25 of the Data Protection Act, the clear principle of security of the data is not well defined. The principle of accountability, who is accountable for your data within an institution that collects your data, that stores your data, is something that needs to be well defined.
Give me an example. So like if my employment record sitting at the HR office of the place where I work, the collector of that data is HR. So
it's the company, actually. It's the organization.
Yes.
It's the organization that is responsible.
Yes.
But HR could be held responsible if they were reckless. You see, like, for example, if it's an organization, you need to have policies and standard operating procedures, for example, to handle personnel files. See, the question is that how does a personnel file come out of the registry to someone's desk, or how does somebody peruse a personnel file? An organization, you need very clear, even without the Data Protection Act, is handling of information, file management. So when I started, the first time I worked in government, there used to be a file movement record where when a file is brought to your table, there's a big black book where you sign. Laibuta has received this file, this is the issue of action. Yeah. So if the HR has been reckless in their handling, for example, they've actually physically given someone who without authorization your personnel file, or they went having fun, they lost the keys or their laptop and somebody had access, then it becomes a disciplinary issue. So in as much as the organization is fully responsible for your data, the individual who acted outside the standard operating procedure or the policies of the organization may also be taken to task. And if they were actually reckless, the Data Protection Act indicates that criminal action may also be taken against them.
Wow. So if, let's say, the HR manager leaves her laptop open or leaves my file on her, she goes for lunch with my file, because she was going somewhere, decided to stop at the canteen, left the file on the table, went, and somebody came and accessed the file, then there's some negligence that can be attributed to her, and she can be she can be viewed as criminally negligent.
What will be criminal is, for example, if that she took the files if they are not supposed to remove the files from a registry, and she went with the file. As she went to lunch, she went with the files.
Yes.
She took the files out of the organization. Yes. But if she left maybe her laptop open, that might be a disciplinary issue. It might not be really a criminal issue. Yeah. But if she, for example, allowed somebody to take a flash disk and download information from her laptop, then that's different.
So she can be charged in a court of law?
Yes, under the Data Protection Act.
I see. What about the other example? During our social media is very, very, very robust and very active, where we saw somebody's private data, hospital data, published, the results of a test that they had undertaken. And it was published widely. Somebody actually took a photo of that and circulated it. Who is it? Who's held to account? Is it the hospital, or is it the lab technician who released that?
This where now you need to carry out an investigation, and it's harder when it's physical documents. Like in digital records, you can actually get a forensic auditor to come and check the data trail and that kind of thing. But when it's hard copy and somebody takes a photo, sometimes it's not possible, especially, for example, the photo they remove, like metadata, where, there's usually information that is tied to, when you take a photo, depending on the device you're using, it can have the location, the owner, that kind of information. So which you can remove. There are tools that you can remove that data. So, of course, it's wrong to post unless with consent. Like, for example, you can't post my medical records online without my consent. So who will I take responsible? Of course, the health facility that I went to, I will say you are responsible for my information being out there, and action ought to be taken against you. And there are actually a lot of complaints that have been taken to the data commissioner where inadvertent exposure of or erroneous health data. Like there's one case where one of these large pharmaceutical pharmacy chain, when they were delivering medication to one of their clients, the medical condition was accessible to the rider. And this person was like, no, surely, no, you really can't have this. And of course, the data commissioner agreed with the client that yes, the rider ought not, the delivery person ought not to have had.
Because he arrives and he's like, Niaje,
It's like, I don't know whether you remember, Ridiculous, when they used to have this Ridiculous show. And then they'll have this scene where they are at a health center and the doctor is calling out people in relation to the sickness that they have. Then they'll say, Nani Kaswende? And the Kaswende person will stand. Nani Kisonono? And so it's that, so health data, so you find even in our laws, that's why we have the Digital Health Act, we have the Data Protection Act, that puts health data at a high level, that requires a high level of protection, because that's sensitive data. So action has been taken against institutions that have engaged in what you have said, where data leaks, where health data leaks. But some people just let it go. But if you actually take them to the data commissioner or go to court, you may find orders made in your favor. The court may rule in your favor.
My takeaway from this is that anyone who leaks data of mine, I may have a cause of action if we establish that they were negligent, that I can call the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner.
Correct.
That's my takeaway from this.
Actually, if you go to the website, I think it's odpc.go.ke, there's a tab where you can file a complaint, where you feel that somebody has handled your data incorrectly. then the data commissioner will investigate. But also, most importantly, is to note that there may be situations where handling of data may be okay. For example, photos, if it's a politician in a political rally, because they are public officials under Article 10 of the Constitution on issues of accountability, then those ones are game. But remember, like last year, there were relatives of the politicians where personal information was being put out there. Of course, their relatives are not they are not public figures.
Yeah.
But for the politicians, I mean, some of them give their numbers openly to their constituents. And because of accountability, then people may reach out to them. But then when you now, our argument becomes weakened when we are saying we also need to expose their relatives. So you'll find that in that kind of situation, the relative may argue, I'm not a public figure. So for what reason are you putting my information out there? But also, there are people who are making the argument, there's not a legal argument, that we have to push this to ensure that these politicians take action. We have to push to the full limit. But you'll find that none of the relatives of the politicians ever took action against people who leaked the information.
Yeah, largely probably because the blowback will be even
correct.
The blowback will be
Yes.
worse. You've said something interesting, which is politicians and their photos are out in public. There's a lot of AI, and this is starting to worry me, especially as we come towards an election year, where people are taking images of public figures and then, appending them and putting them in inappropriate acts.
Yes.
Or saying things that they've not said. Could you speak a little bit about the role of AI and the identity misappropriation, as it were, and getting people to say the wrong things or things that they would typically not have said, using their voices? Where does data protection come into this?
The thing is that in an ideal situation, the Data Protection Act will protect your information so that it's not used. People using an AI tool somebody can create a whole podcast, our Nitpicker Podcast, using AI. All they need to do is get your voice, put it through an AI tool, and it will know how Carol speaks.
Yeah.
And then you'll be wondering, when did I do this podcast?
That's right.
then you realize, oh, this was not me.
Yeah.
So it becomes tricky to identify what is authentic and what is not authentic, because there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of disinformation, because sometimes the disinformation is meant to confuse you and for criminal elements. We don't have laws that may tackle this, but the US recently, they passed a law called the Takedown Act, whereby if there's content, especially what we call AI-generated revenge pornography or non-consensual sharing of intimate images, then it can be taken down. For example, in Germany and the EU, there are countries with the laws that you need to take down. If somebody makes a complaint, you take down the content. Around here, it becomes a bit tricky, and it's even worse during an election, because sometimes I watch a clip and you're like, is this AI? Is it? You can hardly tell. No, it's not like last year. You'll know it's AI because the person has, I don't know, three fingers. Then now they are quite accurate, and I'll admit it's problematic.
Leading up to
election
year,
yeah.
I would imagine this then becomes the burning platform. Because laws in any country, particularly this country, only get moved if it benefits a certain constituency, and if that constituency is more powerful or has got the power to lobby for that. I'm imagining going up to an election year, this can be used.
Yes, it will
detrimentally.
And unfortunately, because it's what people within the media space call it media literacy. Are we able to identify sources of authentic information? But sometimes it's difficult, because you're in many WhatsApp groups and you're seeing people forward clips here, or you're scrolling down social media, whether it's X, Facebook, or whatever other platform, and you're not sure whether this is authentic or not. And if you're not keen, you'll find yourself also being a purveyor of this. You're sharing the same.
Absolutely, forward.
And then you say, shared as received. And then we become the people also sharing that misinformation. So that one is tricky, because sometimes we are not able really to identify what is fake and what is not.
I'm not hearing a solution. From
that's
why I say,
what
what comfort do I have as a Kenyan that my profile will not be used to generate artificial intelligence, that somebody cannot use my face and my voice, and I'm there starting to become an activist when I'm not, or I'm there becoming speaking on
what I'm saying is that
party.
we're in a tricky situation because, like Carol, I mean, I will say you're a public figure. Like there's a lot of content you've put in on social media, right? People can tell you've made talks, you've done a podcast, you've written a lot of material. So somebody can pick all that, put it through an AI, and see how Carol thinks, and create a bot. So if somebody's calling me and they say, yeah, that's Carol. I mean, you've seen that not so long ago, somebody created the voice of a CEO and they transferred tens of millions of dollars outside because it was a voice-activated authorization. Recently, we saw, I think it was the principal secretary in charge of, I think it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He didn't know. He shared AI-generated content. And then later, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know that was AI generated. So you see, and even us, sometimes you share something, then later you're like, guys, sorry, I didn't mean to. I didn't realize that was AI generated.
Mugambi, what you're doing, you're telling me, I really admire your problem, but I don't have a solution.
Correct.
That's what I'm hearing.
So simply, what I'm saying is that, we at some crossroads. Because also, if you start stopping people doing this, people will argue that you are stifling their freedom of expression. You see, it's a two-edged sword. If you talk about bringing down this content, how do you do it without stifling freedom of expression, freedom of the press?
So what you want is people to become more discerning, or how you start
Correct.
to educate. So back to the whole point of educating people, don't give away your PIN, don't give away your personal information. You're saying that we also need to educate everyone, start being a bit more discerning about content.
Yeah, and verify your sources. Verify, because you see, the unfortunate bit is that we've also had media houses on their social media sharing AI-generated content. Then later they're like, we apologize, we didn't realize that is AI-generated.
And that's a whole media agency. How are you expecting my uncle sitting somewhere in a village bar and he's gotten something so salacious and hot? His work is to forward it and put it on the family WhatsApp group.
And WhatsApp is hot. WhatsApp is hot. Exactly. WhatsApp is hot out there. It is. I think a lot of us. It's where a lot of people
primary sources of information. Yeah, somebody said, but I saw it on WhatsApp.
That's where the truth. That's where people have estate groups, church group, mosque group, work groups, high school groups, campus groups. So that information will flow around there. So yes, I'm just saying is that we are in problems, especially. We have elections coming up. These tools are even becoming more sophisticated. So it's hard to identify. But one of the solutions in media literacy is that try to confirm, if you're in a position to, trusted sources, whether you can identify trusted sources of information or your news. Or if, for example, it's politicians, you can also check that if they post it on their social media handles. If they did not, then you can query, maybe or not, it might not be true.
Mugambi, have you heard of the saying, never let the truth get in the way of a good story?
I know.
Yeah. Okay. So what you're saying is what should happen in theory, but that's my key concern.
Yeah,
another key concern being identity theft. So about it was in April, somebody alerted me, sent me a note and said, by the way, there's somebody who's on LinkedIn. They've got a different name. In fact, let me just say the first name. Her name is Matilda, and she's using your photo. And because this person knows me, so of course, the first thing I do, I pick up Matilda M, go on to LinkedIn, and sure enough, she's using my photo, and it's not an online photo. So it's not a photo that I've used in all, as you said, I publish a lot. It's not a photo I've used in online. It's a passport photo that I use it for visa applications and something. So it was a passport photo. It was not online because I know that photo. So I look at it, and immediately I send a request to LinkedIn, take it down. Crickets. I send a reminder to LinkedIn, take it down. Crickets. So somebody tells me, why don't you go online and tell people to go and report that profile?
Yes.
And indeed I do that. And great support from my LinkedIn followers and followers of followers. They start spamming LinkedIn, take this down, take this down. Crickets. Nothing happens. So I write to this person, of course, along the way, but this is a fake person, so of course they're not going to take it down. long story short, so between myself constantly pinging LinkedIn and finally somebody gave me a contact name for how to get around it into the LinkedIn, the actual LinkedIn name, 8 weeks later, together with what this other company is also doing, we managed to get the profile removed. But that was identity theft. That person could have gone on and purported to do a whole bunch of things using my mug.
Yes.
What protection do I have? Because this is now at an international level, Mugambi, and I almost called you Matilda. It's an international level because I'm here, I'm in Kenya. This person, they had a Kenyan name. Yeah. They're using a Kenyan company, but it's on an international platform. So my concern here now is about the globality of fraud and the globality of data and data use and data privacy.
So it's tricky, but we also have the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act.
Tell us about that, because we only hear about it when it's activists being...
Yes. Unfortunately, the bits where it's focused on is where now they want to, the state wants to criminalize action by Kenyans who are criticizing the state. But ideally, in an ideal situation, the implementation of the Computer Misuse of Cybercrimes Act will deal with issues like this identity theft through this digital platform.
When was it created, this act?
I think it was signed in 2018, 2019.
And what was this? Again, what was the purpose?
The purpose essentially was that there's a lot of cybercrime happening. They talked about digital lending, banking fraud, identity theft, and all this kind that is being done on a digital platform. So there was need to create a law that says if you access somebody's digital platform, for example, server, people who are hacking, there's a lot of hacking. If somebody's hacking into an account or to a server or to a system, then that is a crime. If somebody is doing things like the denial of service, like what you saw with the Citizen, that they ping the system so much that you can't access it because there are too many requests, then that ought to be a crime. But unfortunately, they also brought bits where now that can be used to take action against Kenyans who are critical of the government on digital platforms. So they talk about things like posting false information. But the question is, who decides what is false and what is truth? So that's where the problem is. So when you find that there was a challenge, the civil society went to court and said that fair enough, we agree with certain provisions of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, but there was at least, I think it was around 20 provisions that it's indicated that those provisions really curtail freedom of the press, freedom of expression, the right to privacy, the right to dignity. But the High Court said, no. The whole act is constitutional. So now there's an appeal at the Court of Appeal. So it's not the whole act that has a problem. It's these provisions that are being used to, for example, they're used as a reason to torture and kill Kenyans because of what they say online. But definitely there's need for that law on where there's crime that is happening within a digital space. Like scammers, you find that there are people who established, you can call them shops, online shops, and they scam Kenyans. And that law should be able to provide for the investigation, for the prosecution of these individuals who do this.
So if I ever find the person who created this profile, Matilda, I can use a computer misuse, would you call it Computer Misuse
and Cybercrimes Act, yes.
There should be something in there that can protect me from somebody using my identity.
Correct. And then, of course, if it led to something else like defamation, like online defamation, if it led to breach of your privacy, like this person made people to send personal information about you to them, then there's a whole, it can be a criminal process, it can also be a civil process. Well, also if someone profited, if using their images, they profited commercially for it.
That's right. That's exactly what I was going to say. If they're using it to do business.
Correct.
Or commercial.
Yes.
So Mugambi, I'm a mother. What data privacy advice would you offer to parents like me concerning our children? But it's not only, I'm a mother, but I'm also a daughter. And our parents' generation, as you heard, are also big players in this online space, consuming information. For us, it's our children consuming the wrong, you're consuming pornography, consuming violence. But But even for our parents who are quite happy to believe and not question the way you told us to question. I think it was Winston Churchill who says a lie gets around the world faster than the time that a truth has to put its pants on.
Yes.
So at our parents' generation, they're also consuming a lot of data that's not true. What can we do to protect our parents, to protect our children?
So I think I could say for the older members of society, if you're in a position to educate them, and here you find that the individuals who actually go to where the older members of society congregate. So you'll find the people in churches will break down what cyber hygiene means, what disinformation is, and that kind of thing. You find them in mosques. You'll find them in Nyumba Kumi initiatives, in self-help groups, just trying to break down. But you see, that's not sufficient because the scale is a bit limited. For example, the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner has an outreach program where they're trying to go, because people also see privacy and data protection being a city thing, it's a Nairobi thing. So they're putting out these initiatives where they go outside Nairobi to all the counties and try to break down and reach out to as many people as possible and do what we call train of trainers. So you train people who can cascade the same information. But of course, that process needs resources, which may not be readily available. For children, the Communication Authority of Kenya has an initiative for child protection online. So they do school outreach programs where they go to schools and teach children about the usefulness of the digital platform, the usefulness of technology, but also talking about the harms and the potential risks. Talking about simple things like don't post, if you're posting yourself in school, you don't post the badge of your school, don't post where you live, don't post where you frequent. I mean, if they go like for a swimming lesson somewhere, don't post that the swimming lesson is usually here every Tuesday or every Saturday.
So the Communications Authority is actually educating people in schools.
Yes, they have an initiative for public schools, but as I said, one of the challenges, that's why they look for partners, is scaling it. Because it requires resources for you to go from school to school and get professionals who can break down this to a 5-year-old and explain to them that if somebody wants to have a discussion with you online, no, say no. But also all these also a lot of platforms have an age limit and have a parental control tab. So you find that if you establish an account like for your child, let's say for email, then you are able to see what is it they're accessing. You can see the history of the apps that they are using and that kind of thing. But this is also assuming that the parent has the technical know-how.
Thank you.
Thank you. The technical know-how to do this.
And these kids are way more savvy than we are.
Correct. I mean, sometimes a child goes to YouTube. They can hardly speak, but they know what YouTube. So I'm like, what do they press to see what cartoon they want to watch? But they can hardly hold a conversation. But they get the remote. They can tell. They can go and get. So those are the kind of challenges that we have. But as I say, the outreach, the education is where we are lacking because of education institutions that have the know-how and the resources, they really educate the students, the children, the parents on how to go around this.
If you were to do your last words, the last piece of advice you want to give us on data protection, what would it be?
One is that we have to be careful on how we share our data, who handles our data. We have to keep a record of especially sensitive data that affects us, like health data, that financial records, work records, and that kind of thing, because there's potential for harm. Because some people usually say, I have nothing to protect. Let my information be out there. But you see, there's Matilda who got the photo that you use, that you've never made public, and you have no idea how they got it, and now they're using it potentially to scam people online. And then also to know that in case you're not sure or you are worried that your data has been used in the wrong purpose, you can access the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner. I say odpc.go.ke, you can file a complaint or you can call them for them to advise you on what course of action to undertake. Some cases like yourself, if that person used that data for commercial benefit, you can actually go to court and challenge them for perhaps abuse of intellectual property and profiting unlawfully from your image. So there are options that are available. As I said, unfortunately, not everyone knows that this information is available. and also to educate our loved ones, both young and old, who may a bit more gullible on what they consume on social media.
Educate, educate, educate.
Correct.
So security and privacy now, it was bad enough that I was being told security begins with me, yes. But what I'm hearing you saying is privacy now also begins with me and educating the people around me.
Yes. So like we also have to be careful what you post on social media. You see, sometimes you can tell, in people say, you can tell, like, for example, like people in a relationship, you can tell when it's going good and when it's not going good. Because how about people? So if you go to Laibuta's, let's say, IG, and you're like, it's only his photos, you're like, something happened here. Then I post where I go to holiday. People know where my ushago is. People know where I go to the gym. People know where I work. This information can be collected and create a profile of you. And somebody can use that information for whatever purpose, mostly not for a good purpose. So also you have to be careful what kind of information we post out there. For the younger ones, I think what's also is important is just to keep them off constantly posting information, whether it's videos, photos of themselves online. Or if they do have, like if they've reached the age to have an IG account, to keep it closed and not to allow, because as a parent, if you're controlling it, not to allow any friend requests or anything. It's purely just for them and maybe their classmates.
In fact, what I've seen some people doing, especially the influencers, is if they're posting about a location, they post about it 2 or 3 days later when they've left the location, that they're on holiday here or there, to avoid somebody sort of pinging and finding out exactly where it is that they are.
And somebody can know you're not at home. If you post that Ushago, people know Carol is not at home. Then now that becomes a security issue for you. So it's also, but also for influencers, it becomes a slippery slope where they want to be seen as the person of the people. And what is it that you can put out there? What is it that you can't put out there? So it's a two-edged sword for them.
And no precedent that we can be able to draw on.
Yeah.
A few years ago, Mugambi, you posted something on Twitter about a time when you had cleared. No, I hate that word cleared. Let me reframe that. That you had actually managed to turn around a diabetic situation, that you had diagnosis.
Yes.
That you were diabetic free, diabetes free. Yeah. That's very rare. Most people, it's a lifestyle condition and they live with it for a long time, and it generated a lot of interest and a lot of admiration. How did you get diagnosed with diabetes in the first place, and how did you turn that around?
So actually it's diabetes in remission. It really never, because it can recur. But let me explain. So I had no idea that my blood sugars were not within the stated levels. So, but of course there were signs. Diabetes,
what are the stated levels?
You find like thirstiness, lack of sleep, being overweight, losing weight, and those kind of things. But I thought it's just life. It's just life that is. I didn't take much. I didn't think about it much. But then one time I traveled for work, so I went for Geneva. So when I was there, I started feeling unwell. I had a lot of nausea, a lot of passing of water. Then I was like, there could be a problem. So I started feeling dizziness, weakness.
And you started feeling this on the flight to Geneva?
Yes, so on the flight, yes. So I'm not taking a lot of fluids, but my body is just releasing a lot of fluids. Yeah. But maybe I was like, maybe it's the plane environment. I don't
know.
Pressure. Cabin pressure, yeah. So then when I get to Geneva, then so meant to go for this work thing, but I'm telling my colleagues, no, I'm not feeling it, because I tried even have a meal. The body is rejected the meal. Try to have water, immediately it's rejected. So the more I became weaker and weaker in the room, so I just told the reception, no, I think I need an ambulance. You guys need to take me to hospital. So the next time I woke up was in an ICU bed. So when I'm in ICU, so I'm like, okay. The last thing I remember is making the call to the reception, but now I'm in this ICU bed. There are like 5 people in those dust coats.
Yeah, the lab coats.
Those lab coats, and they're like, wow. Then they ask me, are you aware where you are? So I'm like, yeah, I came to Geneva. They're like, no, you're in hospital and you have diabetes. I'm like, no, I don't have diabetes. What do you mean I have diabetes?
Now you're flat on your back in an ICU bed. You're hearing machines beeping.
Yeah.
You're like, I last left seated on a bed calling reception.
Yeah. So, and you see, ICU is quite, it's machines, it's machines. I mean, I was like, okay, this looks like the movies. So I'm like, am I dreaming or something? Because they are, I don't know, because there are tubes, there are cables, there's white light, all this kind of thing. So apparently, yeah. So apparently my blood sugar then was at 48.
And what's the ideal level?
Ideal will be around 5, 6 there on average.
So you were almost 7 times the ideal level of blood sugar.
Yes.
And you were still walking.
Of course, that's why I collapsed. I mean, after the call, I can't remember what happened until now. I was in hospital, and they were trying to wake me up to see whether I can call. So because of the high levels, they were worried that there might have been some brain damage, because 48 is quite high. I was experiencing some onset of renal failure, organ failure, and that kind of thing. So they will wake me up to see whether my mind is still okay.
Mugambi, if you hadn't made that call, we'd be reading Kenyan lawyer dies in a Geneva hotel.
Correct.
And you were alone?
Yes, I was alone. Of course, maybe my colleagues will have found me maybe after they've come from whatever work, maybe in the evening, later, and that kind of thing. So, yeah. So now, so I'm in ICU for 2.5 days. I'm in HDU for a few other days. So cumulatively, I think I was in hospital around 10, 11 days. So, of course, when I get out of hospital, then it's very clear that I have type 2 diabetes. So what happens now is that I'm using two different injections for insulin. There's what called a slow-acting, fast-acting, then the diabetes pills and those kind of things.
So you're injecting yourself?
Yes. So I had to inject myself. It was 2 times a day. I leave hospital, and when I'm in hospital, the doctors are very clear that they tell me these are our findings. They're like, you need to do some lifestyle change, because they were very clear that it's type 2 diabetes. It's able to manage it, and I am in a position to take it into remission. And remission means that it's no longer visible. The blood sugars are okay, but depending on lifestyle change, it can also go back.
The blood sugar has gone down to the level now 5 that is required.
Yes, the ones that is manageable.
Without you having to do the daily insulin injection.
Correct. When I come back, I meet this doctor. He's introduced to me. He's called Dr. Maringo. Unfortunately, passed on due to cancer. Dr. Maringo was taking through his patients on natural ways to manage blood pressure, to manage diabetes, and what we call lifestyle challenges. So he put me through a diet, gave me a regime to follow in terms of working out, hydrating, taking water, etc. In 3 months, I did not need to use the insulin and the diabetes medication, because now, the diabetes type 2 medication, because now my blood sugars were at a level that were within the acceptable limits. So I pushed this. I mean, that was in 2018, and up to today, I've never had any reason to get into diabetes medication.
6 years.
Actually, now it's actually almost 7 years. It's actually 7 years now.
This is amazing.
Yes, so it's
because you never hear of people. I've never heard of. Well, I'm today years old when I'm learning that diabetes can go into remission.
Yes.
Just by changing your food and doing exercises and hydrating.
Yes, and so of course I also had to stop taking alcohol completely, 100%.
Not even a random sip, a random tot,
no,
even half a tot.
The last time I took alcohol was actually maybe 2 days before I was admitted in hospital, which is like in 2017 December. So that is 7.5 years.
What does alcohol do for type 2 diabetes?
If you constantly use, I mean, depending on what kind of alcohol, one, it's excessive carbs that you don't need. Then, of course, when you're having alcohol, your diet also goes all over the place. It has an effect on your sleeping habits, depending on how often you take the alcohol. So for me, I stopped. I mean, I was like, this is one of the life changes that I need to do. So after hospital, I stopped alcohol, changed my diet. But also over the years, it's been critical that I constantly also do medical tests, checkups, and also randomly test my blood sugar and blood pressure from time to time, just randomly to ensure that it's still within the limits that are healthy.
And what I'm hearing from you today is, if your body is telling you it's shutting down, listen to it.
Correct, because when the body now reacts, you have no recourse but to listen. And for me, as I said, I found myself in an ICU bed, not something I had to visualize. And I also don't want that experience, at least for something that I can manage.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you can get to hospital for things that are not manageable, but which is okay. But for this, I mean, from the information I got from my doctors is that it was possible to take the diabetes into remission.
Very good.
Yeah.
Mugambi, we're about to come to an end. And towards the end, what we do is we ask you a series of questions, and I want you to respond with one-word answers, with whatever comes first to mind.
Yes.
All right?
All right.
We call this segment Nitpicks on the Quick. Early riser or sleep in over weekends?
I'll give you a lawyer answer. It depends.
Or what happened the night before? Well, now you've told us you're not drinking alcohol.
No, it depends on the assignment. I mean, if I'm on assignment that requires me to be an early riser, I'll be an early riser. If it's an assignment that requires me to sleep late...
This is weekends. Just keep it simple.
Oh, okay. If it's weekends...
You see, now that's the problem with lawyers. You don't listen.
That's why I said...
Early riser or sleep in on weekends?
I'm an early riser.
There we go. Text or phone call?
Text.
Cooking a meal or ordering breakfast? Or ordering takeout?
Cooking.
What do you cook?
I love doing lots of barbecue. Anything to do with meat. And potatoes. I'm part of the Waru nation.
There you go. Mountains or the beach?
Mountain.
Travel back in time or fast forward your life?
Travel back in time to have
Where would you go?
conversations with people maybe I should have had more conversations with.
Like who?
My grandmother, my grandfather. They're very wise individuals. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite Kenyan dish?
Waru, potatoes.
Potatoes are not a Kenyan dish. Potatoes are a vegetable.
Now, you've not
I'm
had
going to ask that
Waru
question
cash
again.
crop of Nyandarua. You've not had...
Potatoes cooked how?
Man, I love them fried and roasted.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you just love potatoes?
I love, it's one of the things that, every week I have to have potatoes.
Every week or every day?
Week, not.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be healthy.
Yes. Yeah.
Every week, at least once. One meal throughout the week, one meal will be,
What's the one thing you always carry with you?
My phone.
What's your go-to stress reliever?
Gym.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's the most inspiring place you visited? Definitely not Geneva.
No, not. But I appreciate, they saved my life. Let's say that without Geneva, maybe it would have been a different issue. I would say somewhere that gave me deep thought, I think the slavery castles in Ghana, Accra, in Zanzibar, they quite give some thought into the perspective of life. And I'll explain it this way. Like there's one, so it's called Osu Castle in Accra. And they were where they will put the slaves and they'll have the door of no return. If you pass that door, it's a wrap, you're going into slavery. But what really got me thinking is that the dungeons were below a church. So you'll find that there'll be people praying and worshiping up here, and down here you have a small room like this with maybe around 300 people who are being shipped into slavery. Really gave me a very different perspective about life. Yeah.
Read the book or watch the movie?
Mostly read the book, because the books I read, there are no movies about them.
What's the last book that you read that they'll never make a movie from?
I don't know, maybe they will, a document. So I read about the history of Alibaba. So most of the books that I read are about tech business. So the last book I read was about Jack Ma and his journey to start Alibaba. Before that, I read about the Huawei journey. Before that, I read about the NVIDIA journey, because I work within the tech space. So I really want to understand how tech business functions. Of course, I know there might be documentaries, but what the authors write there are things that the book will say that you wouldn't find in a documentary or movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mugambi, thank you so much. You've really educated us about data protection, data privacy, consent, and what we need to be telling our parents as well as our children, since we are the sandwich generation. It's been a great pleasure hosting you.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you for the invite.
Asante sana.
Karibu.
That's it for this episode of the Nitpicker Podcast. A big thank you to Mugambi Laibuta for reminding us that in an age of data saturation, clarity, caution, and conscience still matter. Privacy does start with you, whether it's verifying that people are who they say they are, using two-factor authentication, avoiding sketchy Wi-Fi, or just thinking twice before oversharing online. Small actions stack up. But it shouldn't end there. We need laws that protect us, institutions that respect us, and experts like Mugambi pushing the boundaries on our behalf. If today's conversation made you pause before hitting accept all, then good, we're doing our job. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and keep questioning even what seems obvious, because here at the Nitpicker Podcast, every detail is up for debate. Until next time, read the terms, guard your data, and stay vigilant.